Morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? I hope well. Um, I'm sort of dressed. I am dressed as a generic Confederate officer would be dressed. So this dress could actually act as any type of dress from, say, Eastern all the way to far Western theater. Eastern being Virginia, North Carolina, West Virginia, and then Western would be Tennessee, Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, and parts of North Carolina, and far west would be Arkansas and Missouri and Texas. Um, a lot of people are like, look at officers and think, well, my gosh, they just had such an easy life for that time period. And it's like, well, I've been doing the reenacting for almost 30 years, and I've found out a lot of stuff about the privates as well as the officers. One thing was that you would think that the officers got issued their clothing. Nope. Officers being issued clothing did not happen until like World War I, or actually Spanish-American War. But for the Confederate Army, a lot of your officers went off in militia uniforms, which was like a step up from what they issued their guys. And the Confederate forces, which is what I'm representing here, tended to, at first, when it was just 90-day militia, let the officers wear what they wore. And then when they decided to put together a provisional Confederate Army, a regular Confederate Army, they decided to begin to issue officers' clothing as well as enlisted clothing. Well, that worked out for almost a month and a half. It wasn't very long. The Confederate government found out real quick that it was very expensive to try to clothe the officers as well as the enlisted guys, and the officers ended up if they ended up dying, you're more or less just taking care of the clothing inside of their coffin. So at that time, you think about it, for just the Army of Northern Virginia, you had, or what would become Army of Northern Virginia, you had 90,000 men with probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 to 10,000 officers. And a full uniform at that time, boots, hats, coats, pants, would run you about $450, in between $350 and maybe even up to $500. So the Confederate government quickly decided to just reimburse the officers when they got their stuff. Now, here's the other thing. The officers became responsible for every piece of clothing they had and every piece of equipment they had. They did not get any government issue stuff. Everything I wear is pretty much stuff that I am responsible for. I had to pay for a privately made haversack as well as a Sam Brown belt. The only thing that I would get a lot of times was like the sword, and even that would sometimes cost money. But I'd be responsible for everything else that I'm wearing, all the way up till about late 1863 or 64, when the Confederate government began to get more uniform for their military, and in 63 it allowed the officers, the Confederate officers, to buy their own stuff from the Confederate government, which had the cloth as well as the jackets, and the jackets were sold to the officers at like $8 a jacket. It was one of those things because out of necessity, the Confederate officers at this point in 1863 going into 64 did not have a ton of options. The tailors were not taking the money they had. The cloth was hard to get a hold of to build a jacket or a coat or a pair of trousers, and you couldn't get a tailor to make a full uniform for under $400. And several officers found that out even as early as October of '62, following the Kentucky invasion in October. So, but um, my look is sort of like I've got a coat a frock coat, which was pretty much sent from home. The trousers are sort of my own making, or I might have gotten them from the government. Most likely, this would all come from home.
He's in the woods.
So, but I appreciate your time. I hope you've learned something new about this. And you have a good day. God bless. Bye.